Across history, empires have risen not only with swords and armies, but with symbols. Some symbols are written in stone, others in banners, and some in sound. Among the greatest sounds of empire, none echoed more deeply across the battlefields of Europe than the music of the Mehter, the Ottoman military band. For centuries, the Mehter was the heartbeat of the Ottoman army. Its thunderous drums and piercing zurnas were not simply melodies, but weapons, designed to inspire soldiers, terrify enemies, and proclaim the might of the Sultan. To the Ottomans, the Mehter was courage. To Europe, it was fear. And to history, it remains the oldest surviving military band in the world, a living echo of an empire that once stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. This is the story of the Mehter, the band that shook Europe. To understand the Mehter, we must travel back to the beginnings of Ottoman power. The story begins in the late 13th century, when Osman Gazi, a frontier chieftain in northwestern Anatolia, carved out a small principality on the ruins of the Seljuk state. Like many Turkic rulers before him, Osman inherited traditions from the steppes of Central Asia, traditions where music was not merely entertainment, but power. The nomads of the steppes had long used drums, horns, and cymbals to organize their armies, to raise morale, and to terrify their enemies. The Mongols thundered into battle with kettle drums mounted on horses. Turkic tribes carried long trumpets that echoed across valleys. Music was a weapon of psychology long before gunpowder became a weapon of war. According to Ottoman tradition, the Mehter as an institution began when the Seljuk Sultan Alaeddin Kikabad sent a band of musicians to Osman Gazi as a gift. These musicians played each evening outside the ruler's tent, signifying sovereignty and divine blessing. Over time, this custom evolved into a permanent band, the Meterhang. By the 15th century, the Mehter was no longer a frontier tradition but a formal institution. It became inseparable from the Ottoman army. Wherever the Sultan's banner was raised, the Mehter played. The Mehter was not just music, it was ceremony. It proclaimed the presence of the Sultan. It marked the rhythm of daily life in the barracks. And when war came, it became the soundtrack of battle. Imagine the scene. A European army waits on the plains of the Balkans. Dawn is breaking, mist clings to the fields. In the distance, a low rumble begins. At first, it is like thunder, soft but growing. Then the piercing cry of the zurna cuts through the air. Cymbals clash. Drums roar. The sound grows louder, heavier, closer. Marched with the Ottoman armies, playing during advances, during assaults, even during sieges. The rhythm of the music kept soldiers moving in step. The sharp blasts of instruments signaled commands across the chaos of battle. The sheer volume, so loud it could be heard miles away, was designed to overwhelm the senses. For Ottoman soldiers, the Mehter was inspiration. Its songs carried themes of faith, of destiny, of loyalty to the Sultan. The rhythm of the drums gave courage, the shrill notes of the zurnas stirred adrenaline. To march with the Mehter was to feel unstoppable. But for the enemy, the experience was very different. The sound of the Mehter became synonymous with dread. It meant the Ottomans were coming. It meant battle was inevitable. European chroniclers wrote of soldiers trembling before the Mehter even appeared on the horizon. To many, the music itself was a form of warfare, breaking morale before a single sword was drawn. The psychological effect of the Mehter on Europe cannot be overstated. From the 15th to the 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire was the most powerful force pressing into Europe. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, the conquest of Hungary in 1526, and the sieges of Vienna in 1529 and 1683 all carried with them the echo of the Mehter. To European ears, the Mehter was a symbol of the unstoppable advance of Islam and empire. The sound of the drums, heard in the distance, sent shivers through villages and cities alike. One Austrian chronicler wrote that the terrible Turkish music could be heard for miles, making the earth tremble and the heart quake. In an age when most music was gentle, played on lutes and viols, the power of the Mehter was unlike anything Europeans had ever known. Its sheer volume and relentless rhythm felt almost supernatural. To many, it was not music at all, but a sound of doom. This fear became cultural. In the imagination of Europe, the Mehter symbolized Ottoman might. It was the soundtrack of sieges, of raids, of invasions. Even when the army was far away, the memory of its music haunted European minds. But what exactly made the Mehter so unique? The Mehter was built around powerful instruments. Davul, kettledrums deep, thunderous drums that shook the earth. Zurna, a piercing woodwind, sharp and loud enough to cut through any noise. Naker, smaller kettle drums played in rapid, rolling rhythms. Cymbals, clashing metal plates that added sharp accents. Kos, massive drums mounted on camels or elephants for parades. Baru, trumpets blasting calls that announced commands. Together, these instruments created a sound both majestic and terrifying. The music followed strict rules. Mehter songs, called Mehterhain Pasrivi, were composed in cycles, with rising intensity. They often carried religious or martial themes, invoking God, the Sultan, or heroic courage. The structure was deliberate. The steady beat of the drums gave order to the troops. The loud blasts kept enemies awake and unnerved during sieges. The combination of shrill and deep sounds created an atmosphere of chaos for the enemy, but clarity for the Ottomans. The Mehter was, in every sense, a tool of psychological warfare. As the Ottoman armies marched deeper into Europe, their music did not remain confined to the battlefield. It spread. By the 16th and 17th centuries, Europeans had begun to imitate Mehter music. At first, this was an attempt to understand the enemy. Later, it became fascination. Royal courts in Austria, Poland, and Russia began to hire Turkish bands to imitate the Mehter. The exotic sound of drums and cymbals became fashionable. Marching bands across Europe added instruments directly inspired by Ottoman music. What had once been a sound of terror slowly became a sound of style. The most lasting legacy of the Mehter in Europe came through classical music. Composers across the 18th century fell in love with what they called alla Turca, the Turkish style. The pounding rhythms and clashing cymbals of the Mehter inspired some of the greatest names in European music. Joseph Haydn composed pieces in Turkish style for the Esterhazy court. Ludwig van Beethoven used Turkish-inspired percussion in his famous Ninth Symphony. And most famously, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart wrote the Rondo alla Turca, directly inspired by Mehter music. What once symbolized fear and invasion had become art and entertainment in Europe's finest concert halls. This transformation was remarkable. The sound of the enemy turned into music of delight. But it also shows the cultural power of the Mehter. Its rhythms could not be forgotten. They demanded to be remembered, imitated, transformed. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was changing. The empire that had once struck fear across Europe was now struggling to keep pace with modern states. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II abolished the Janissaries, the elite corps of Ottoman soldiers. With them, he also disbanded the Mehter. In their place, the Sultan created a European-style military band, influenced by Western orchestras. For the first time in centuries, the sound of the Mehter was silenced. To many Ottomans, this was a symbol of decline, the abandonment of old traditions in favor of Western imitation. The mighty music that had once shaken Europe was now relegated to memory. But history has a way of returning. In the 20th century, as Turkey sought to preserve its cultural heritage, the Mehter was revived. The military museum in Istanbul re-established a Mehter band, performing in traditional dress, with traditional instruments. Today, the Mehter plays not on battlefield. The Mehter has become a bridge once again, not between armies, but between cultures. A reminder that music, once used as a weapon, can also be a celebration of identity and heritage. The Mehter is more than music. It is memory. It carries the story of an empire that rose from the frontiers of Anatolia to the gates of Vienna. It tells of battles won and lost, of fear and fascination, of tradition and transformation. To the Ottomans, it was courage. To Europe, it was terror. To history, it remains a symbol of the power of sound. Even today, when the Mehter plays, one can almost hear the march of soldiers across the Balkans, the clash of swords at Vienna, the prayers at Constantinople. So, the Mehter still resonates, but no longer as the roar of conquest. Now it echoes as the song of history.